Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Growth Focus podcast, where tech leaders come together to share their insights and their expertise for the tech industry. This week, I'm super pleased to have Ken Winell from the Nexus Digital Group, and he's going to be sharing his story and some of his expert insights into the industry. So without further ado, Ken, why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little snippet on your story of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Thanks. And hi, Gary. So hello, everybody. I have a very circuitous route of getting to where I am today. I started way back when in the Air Force, believe it or not. I was an avionics technician. I was working on F-16s and F-15s and deploying in various countries as the U.S. bases were deploying the new equipment. Somewhere around 1985, I think it was, I was getting ready to leave the Air Force, and I got a job at a defense contractor making guidance and navigation systems. So I was working with ring laser gyros and accelerometers and coming up with precision targeting, and it was crazy stuff, right? A lot of exciting things.
Yeah.
And I could have gone down that electrical engineering path because that's my background at EE, and I could have done that, I think, forever. But what ended up happening was IBM announced this crazy thing called the personal computer. And when they did that, it was very impactful for businesses, and people started to use it. And, I remember that, it was WordPerfect and Lotus and all these crazy apps that are, now tossed on the pile of ancient archives. But I got into computing and understanding that, a single person working on a computer could be productive. But as they started to really develop networking and communicating between computers, that's where I really jumped on board early. And I got into doing LAN and WAN deployments and heavy infrastructure. And that was really interesting. And I then started working for a solutions company that a friend of mine owned. And we started doing business solutions, designing client server applications and actually what they call N-tier computing, which was before the internet, right? Kind of like N-tier, multiple layers of a presentation layer, a logic layer, and a data layer, right? And then kind of said, okay, yeah, this internet is going to be something, and we should really think about that. And then I broke off and I started my own business called Iconium. And that was a software development company that was building internet-based applications for e-commerce, for retail, for a variety of different businesses. We grew that. It was in the .com era, so everybody had to have a .com website. There was a lot of money to be made there, so we did that. I sold it to another company, and then I did some earn-out to stay. And then I moved into what I would call my philanthropic phase, where I said, you know what, I want to give back, and I really feel like I can help another company, because I saw where technology was going. I kind of was always a futurist. And then I kind of moved into philanthropy. I started to work for New York Roadrunners, which puts on the New York City Marathon. I was the CTO of New York Roadrunners, and I put in some systems for tracking runners, which was, when you run a marathon today, you get a bib, and that bib is a little RFID that allows you to cross over these mats, and then we can time you and, predict when you're going to finish and all that. So it all goes into data, right? And then from there, went back into sports again and went to go work for Tough Mudder, which was another sports organization, but they did obstacle courses. And again, they needed technology. I was CTO for that. Then I got into life sciences, and I decided that, all right, it's time to go back to the for-profit world. And I started working with healthcare agencies. I took a job as a CTO of a small independent ad agency that then took me to probably the top 5 pharmaceutical companies out there. And we built very complex omni-channel marketing and data analytics systems and started getting into data visualization. And then a couple of years ago, finally decided, you know what, let's be something different. And I started a company called Nexus Digital Group, where it's just 4 very senior executives that are doing advisory services for companies, because we don't want to be the ones who are there doing the 3-year implementation and the rollout and deployment of Salesforce. But what I am interested in doing is helping companies transform. When I recognized where artificial intelligence was going, I said, this is the future. We need to really anticipate that and what's going to follow AI, which is the metaverse reborn, metaverse 2.0, if you will. And so that's where we are today. So our business today is modeled around advisory services, helping companies really understand how to leverage technology to enhance their business. And that's really what I want to focus on, because my whole spiel in the past is, I could build any system, but that's cookie cutter. What you really want is to innovate and really try to drive and transform businesses. So that's how I'm here today.
Absolutely. Well, what a fascinating career you've had. It really is.
It's wild. I know.
And I love it. I just love listening to sort of it that, right from the very beginning, pre-internet, all the way through today, which leads us, it's a lovely little segue, Ken, into AI. I mean, AI is one of those big buzz, not just a word, but a whole big system and an infrastructure that's around today. And it's affecting not just the tech industry, it affects a lot of the industries out there today. What is your view on AI right now? And where do you think is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What is your view on AI?
That's a great question. So honestly, what I tell people all the time is AI is two letters put together, and it should scare the crap out of you because everybody thinks it's something different. Is it Skynet coming to take us over and, reaching the Terminator? Or is it this ubiquitous utopia that we're all going to have and be connected? Or is it Ready Player One from a standpoint of, hey, you're just going to be attached to stuff? I don't think it's any of that. I think what we've discovered is that the era of computing has gotten so sophisticated and the algorithms that have been developed are very sophisticated. And so now when you look at natural language processing, when you look at machine learning, when you look at how these neural networks can be effective, it's the ability to transform a business by improving efficiencies, by speeding up how you create content, and by doing many things. And so it's more than just generative AI. So everybody thinks of ChatGPT, which, hey, look, it came out in 2022, was the fastest adopted application, ever. And now you have, ChatGPT, you've got Gemini, you've got Anthropic, you've got Perplexity, you've got hundreds. Right? Along with that came a whole bunch of ethical concerns that I think we all need to be very aware of. And so when we advise clients now, it's AI can help you, but let's make sure that we have ethical and legal considerations up front and developing your policy. Like, what's your maturity assessment with respect to AI? So I go into businesses, I go to a law firm, right? And I talk to the general counsel or the managing partner of a law firm. My first question is, what's your AI policy? Because you need to be protected and indemnified that you're not letting somebody, make a claim or do something. Copyright infringement. The litigation is just beginning. The EU passed an AI act, but the US has not done that yet. So again, we're still in the Wild West mode. 36 months, it's going to be a little more regulated. It's going to have more maturity to it. There are some other disruptive things that are starting to happen from the platform providers and that stuff. But in general, I think will enhance business capabilities. I think it's going to change the way that people work. I think, as I often say, I said, listen, AI is not going to replace you, but someone who knows AI will replace you. And that's a big difference, right? Understanding that you need to use it, right, in order to be more productive. And so when I go to create a statement of work or when I create a contract now, I'm going to pull up ChatGPT because it's going to help me get it done. And it's going to get it. What normally would take me 5 hours takes me 5 minutes. That's an improvement in savings. But it's not the only thing that I rely on. And, that's what you have to really make sure you're catching. And so when we advise clients now, it's like, let's understand how AI is going to impact your business. And it doesn't matter whether it's generative AI, whether it's machine learning, whether it's, replacing RPA or, whatever other tools you might be using. But understand the cultural impact, like what's it going to do to somebody's role? What's it going to do and how's it going to change? The low-hanging fruit, which we tell everybody all the time, okay, if you have customer call centers, AI is going to make your life much better and it's going to improve your call center responses and it's going to make the people that work for you happier because it's going to handle the 90% of the crap when, Joe calls up. There's a great British, you'll remember this, the IT crowd. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Is your computer on? Have you rebooted it? Right? Those are 95% of the problems. Just first, is it plugged in? Okay. Right? Chatbots can do that right now, right? Today. And if you think about that 90% reduction, then I'm getting to the real problem. How happy are you when you call customer service and they resolve it for you right on the phone and you're not going through a scripted routine with somebody who's just reading off a piece of paper? So
I think it's a really key point you mentioned there is you're actually getting to when the human actually now deals with another human. They're not having to go through beginning rigmarole of everything, like you say.
Right.
The real basic questions. Because no one's really, certainly through my interviews that I've had with other companies and just with people in general and my clients, no one.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, I have this long sordid history that we just went through, right? Let me tell you about auto attendants and how you would scream into the phone, representative, and you're slamming the phone because it's not understand. You say, right? They made comedy movies over it, right? That's the risk that you have if you don't do it right. And so understanding that you can very quickly solve these problems and that AI is reliable for these very specialized things, it's good. Now, there are case studies already around. Alaska Air is a good story where there was a bereavement issue and someone talked to a chatbot and the chatbot said, oh, yeah, we'll give you bereavement pay. And it actually was wrong and they tried to reverse it. Then the airline had to go back and eat their own words. But those are the kind of exceptions that you need to plan for and contingency planning. But the reality is AI can give you very reliable results if you have it as a private model, not a public model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned something there which, because it's very easily missed, but it's very important. It is about having the private model. It absolutely is for security reasons and moving forward for the sake of your company. Moving as a slight segue then, you're obviously advising a lot of companies out there. This is with your vast years of expertise. What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing out there that you're either having to try and solve or resolve? What are the outcomes? What are the challenges that your clients are generally finding in today's economy out there?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I'll probably give you an answer that you weren't expecting. I think what we find is that we are in I kind of focus on the small and mid-sized space, right? I'm not going after, Boeing. I'm going after much smaller companies, right?
Yep.
Although Boeing could use our help. Anyway, that's a long story. But the idea is that most mid-size and small businesses that are, $3 to $10 million in revenue, they think that the enterprise expense, enterprises are spending millions on AI. And if you just follow any of the trade regs, you'll see the same thing. Oh yeah, AI is great hype and all that stuff. But the enterprises that can afford to spend that, yeah, they're going to do that. But your small business is not going to spend the same amount of money, and it doesn't translate scaling it up or down. So the biggest fear that we see and the biggest area of uncertainty is that, and I just talked to a construction company about, using AI for doing bill and materials. You could basically take from blueprints and basically it interpolates and gives you a bill of lading, gives you all the information you need. It calculates the overage that you want to have and all that, right? And, Autodesk is the leader in this, and they have a thing called Construction Cloud, and their AI component to that is really big. So I'm talking to this construction guy, and he's not, Toll Brothers. He's a small company that has, one isolated region that he's building houses in. And so he's not going to spend $10 million to put in an AI and an integrated system. So his whole fear was, hey, what can I do for the amount of budget that I want to allocate, and what's the return on that investment? And I think companies have been very gun shy. When we go in, that's actually one of our secret sauces, if you will, is because we don't sell the solution. We sell the maturity assessment. Let's see how it's going to affect you. Let's see what it's going to give you as a roadmap. And then you can make the choices on your own when you're ready. And if your business is fluctuating because the revenues are down this month, you can wait a month. But it's understanding that your competitors are doing it already, or if they're not, they're going to. And it's really, they're either nipping at your heels or getting at you from the top. And you have to really just, and I talk to companies all the time. I'm a member of Vistage. And so the Vistage team, if you don't know what that is, it's kind of an executive coaching group. They talk about this all the time. Is like, what does that mean to the valuation of a business? What does it mean to the equity that I have? Right. And so we're trying to tackle it from that perspective, because I think that's the secret sauce. I think there's fear, doubt, and uncertainty everywhere, FUD everywhere. But I think in today's economy, people are willing to spend money if they see that it's going to give them a return, not a 5-year return, but a 2-year return. So I think those windows have collapsed a little bit. I think there is that uncertainty about whether the economy is going to go up and consumers are going to continue to spend the way they've been spending. And so I think you just have to really look at an individual case basis and say, what's right for you? If you try to lump everybody together, you can't really do that. And yes, analytically, I can give you trends, but the trends are trending up, and all indicators right now, all the economic indicators are trending up.
Yeah. And I think it was really interesting. And I think that the listeners and the viewers here would be very, very interested. You mentioned the ROI, and people, as I said, the windows have come down now, rather than a 5 or a 10-year return ROI, especially with something like AI. They're looking for a much, much shorter return on that. How do you explain that to people about an ROI upon something that's almost intangible to a degree, like AI?
Yeah. So let's use our chatbot example. So if I go to a company and they have, a 20-person call center, and they're utilization on their call center that the average employee is utilized 85% of their time answering calls, right? And the chatbot, we can predict and say the chatbot could take 60% of that 80% and free them up, right?
Yeah.
What are those 20 people going to be doing? And is that a reduction in headcount? Is that an improvement in customer service? And so some of the conversations have been, hey, we can now take these people and we make them brand ambassadors and have them actually going out to the storefronts where you're selling your products and actually giving these free seminars because they're no longer tied up in doing customer service. And then the light bulb goes off to the CEO because the CEO says, hey, that's a new service offering, and I might even be able to charge for that later on. So it's a new revenue stream. At the same time, the return on the investment is, hey, a chatbot is, $25,000 to put it in. Like, it's money well spent because he's going to save $250,000 on the 20 people, and that utilization. So it's really, you have to show them, it's almost like grade school math. You have to say, okay, if you spend this is what's going to happen. And there's always a little of, caveating, but I think it's important to note that it's like, yeah, these are standards, they're benchmarks, and you hold them accountable. And basically, the whole idea is you don't take on something without having specific goals and milestones in mind that you can checkpoint along the way. You don't say, oh, come back to me in 6 months and I'll see if it works. It's like, no, I want to measure it every month, every week if needed, right? Those are the kind of things you have to do.
Exactly right. And I think it's very much of a case of we don't know what we don't know. And it's people like you, advisors like you, and that have to go in and say, look, let me show you a different way of looking at this.
Yeah.
You're probably looking at this wrong and can't see the proper ROI. You're probably looking
from tunnel vision. It's tunnel vision. People have a narrow focus. I mean, I did it when I had my company. When I had Iconium, I could only think about software development. I couldn't think about anything else. And I had tunnel vision, even though people were telling me, hey, it's not all about software development. It's about culture. It's about people. It's about making sure that you have mentoring going on. I never even thought about that. Those were the mistakes I made along the way, is understanding that I'm just going to grow the business. Developers are a dime a dozen. That's not true, right? It's not true. And so you have to really learn on the job. And when you're in a leadership role, those are the mistakes that can kill a company. So you really want to have somebody come in who's been there, done that, because the experience shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Experience shows, and it's not necessarily more experience than the person running their company. It's just a different perspective.
Exactly.
It's experience from a different perspective.
Outside perspectives help a lot. Yeah,
absolutely.
I've had people say, Ken, it's you're a fresh face, but the reality is you come in with a perspective that we didn't even think about. And when you say that, the light bulb goes off, because then they're like, oh yeah, that's like a totally different thing.
Yeah,
I used to call myself the IT whisperer for a while, because I was like, oh, tell me your issues and I'll tell you what I think we can do. But that's not the case either anymore, because it's really not about IT. It's about the business. I've moved away from being technology centric and thinking about it from a business centric perspective.
Absolutely. And I think it's refreshing to hear that, and it's also encouraging to hear that, because especially from our point of view, when we're with our clients or with our partners, it is not just about what you do as a company. It's now building the business as an asset. If we can build the business and turn it into an asset as opposed just as a place where you work, it has a bigger enterprise value, and you have more choices at the end of it to do what you want to do. And this is why we work with our clients to build that particular thing. So that leads me quite nicely then for someone who has held various roles, profit and philanthropic, and different companies. You've seen how companies and CEO attitudes or C-suite attitudes change. What would you say is probably one of the biggest mindsets that successful CEOs, CIOs, CTOs have to have today?
That's what it is. I love that question, and it's one of my favorite questions, because I always answer it the same way, and I'll caveat it a little bit and say I'm not repeating myself, but there are two key things here, right? First is a CEO must have vision. Where do they want to go? What do they want to do, right? Where is the company headed, right? From that perspective. And, whether you believe in it from an internal thing, hey, I'm saving lives, or whatever it might be, right? That's so vision and passion are kind of lumped together. But then the other thing, which is the other key ingredient, and it's critical, is adaptability. Like, you can't become so rigid that you say, oh, I know I'm doing it the right way, and everybody has to fall in line. And when it's not working for you, to not change. Like, the whole idea is you've got to be adaptive. And so having that vision and staying focused on the vision is key. But how you get there, it's not a straight line. It's curved. It's got winds and bumps and potholes. And you've got to be able to understand that that's what's ahead of you. And you can always look back and remember your history, right? Been there, done that, right, is a good line. But at the same time, it's understanding, hey, it's not always a straight path. And that's kind of the important thing to take away.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think that's very pertinent and very important. And business is like you say, it's not a straight line. It's a red light. Now we go to a green light, and we reach the final. It's not like, it's not a 100-meter slash. It is effectively like a sat nav or a GPS system. You put your destination in, you know where you want to be, and sometimes there's a road work, sometimes there's a road closure, and
and I think a lot of CEOs out there get the management school style. If you go to MBA classes, your management school style says it's all about velocity. It's not. I mean, velocity is important, and you definitely not want to have, you want to try to have that velocity curve as sharp as possible. But at the same time, velocity is just one component of this, and understanding that sense of urgency is key. But at the same time, it's like, guys, understand. It's like, I need to have the vision, and I need to know, we may turn 90 degrees because we have to do something different.
Yeah. And talking about having to making shifts, all right, making shifts, unavoidable shifts, or some of you just didn't see it before. What would you say, if you could share with us, maybe an example, obviously keeping names out of it, of a particular shift that came across, something that never, maybe one of your clients or with your history, something happened and you thought, well, that wasn't meant to happen. And how did you deal with it? Or how did you advise someone to deal with it? If you can give us an example of that.
Yeah, I can give you an example. It's 2007. Yeah, I'll give you the example. And I have a visual aid. The iPhone came out. So back in that day, 2007, the primary phones in most organizations were either BlackBerries or the Palm Pilot Trio devices, whatever they were. And, the idea of a candy bar, that's what they call these phone devices at the time, phones, was unheard of. And I think companies said, oh, BlackBerry's our device, and we had all the BlackBerry addicts, and you would see everybody pull it out on the plane, and they'd be texting each other and all that stuff. And I remember someone standing up at a meeting and said, well, we feel that our focus should be on, securing up the enterprise, making sure that we have secure emails, making sure that we're able to communicate effectively. And we think that the iPhone is too consumer oriented, and it's never going to take hold. And, at the time, the focus was the leading operating systems were BlackBerry and then Windows CE, right, which was a Microsoft phone that they, licensed to Nokia and all these things. And 2 years later, that market is gone, and the iPhone had taken over, and Android launched, and so there were different elements. But even to this day, I use that as a classic example of a disruptive shift that had occurred where the user experience changed. And it didn't take much. What happened was, and I was there, I saw it happening, was that the CEO of a major Fortune 500 company, his kid liked the iPhone. He got the iPhone, gave it to his dad. His dad started using it in the office, realized that he could get his email, told his IT team, hey, no, I know you have these security rules. I know you have, no, make it work. And then all of a sudden, the CEO had it, then the CFO had it, and then it just propagated through the whole organization. And it was a huge change. And it also brought on the whole BYOD, or bring your own device mentality, because companies no longer realize, oh, I have to give you a phone when you start work here, right? And that's also drove the carriers to come up with the pricing models that they've come up with today, as opposed to you pay by the minute, right? And so it became really interesting how that single event disrupted all downstream.
Yeah. And 2007, right? And you just
2007.
It's nearly 20 years ago. It's nearly 20 years ago that happened. We can remember it, but it was such a long time ago, and so much has changed in that particular time.
And to this day, so we're in the same bubble right now with AI that we were with the iPhone. And that's the analogy. That's what gives me the strength and my competitive advantage, if you will, is because I've lived through these transitional pieces, the .com era, right? The iPhone era, right? The internet era. And you start thinking about that stuff. And that's why age, we talk about ageism. We talk about, at what point do you go out to pasture? But for somebody like me, who's a technologist and a futurist, I see what's coming. And so I'm telling you, point blank, it's like the AI revolution we're at the beginning stages of it. There's more to come. And, we haven't talked about humanoid robots. We haven't talked about how the items of convenience will start to propagate, but that's next. And all these things are going to start to really, and so 20 years from now, when the next podcast is automatically beamed into the chip in your head, right? And you're listening to it, and Gary was, hey, remember that podcast? That's what's going to happen. They're going to say, wait a minute, yeah, they predicted it, and this is what's happening.
Yeah, and we're living in a fascinating time, and where we've seen growth and tech growth over the last 20 years is exponential, and that curve continues to be an exponential growth, and it's almost hard for people within the industry to keep up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm fascinated by people that, tell me that they're working on some of these tools. It's like, how do you keep up with that? I can't even keep up with it. And I've been in it forever, and it's like, wait a minute, I spend 50% of my time doing research on new things because I want to understand them, and I want to see, is it a practical thing that I could bring to a client?
Yes, absolutely. And this is one of the key things, certainly from other interviews that I've done, it takes more time. So it's always ironic that all these new systems are coming in place to save time and to give us more time back, but we have to spend more time in it, learning it to keep up with it. It's almost like an oxymoron that's going on within the industry.
You're absolutely right. It is, yes.
Well, we have to do it. Well, as a final question, Ken, and thank you very much for sharing your expertise and your thoughts and your insights. It's been fascinating. It's a bit of a loaded question for you, and I always like to ask a loaded question at the end. As a man after my own heart, but understanding how business isn't just a business. It's an asset. It's a saleable asset for the founder, for the owner. They just have to see it differently. They just got to change and understand that if they put different processes in place, different systems in place, they could actually see a much better future for the company, and then they'll start treating it differently. What would be your number one piece of advice to CEOs, founders, owners who haven't quite understood the benefit yet of making their business an asset as opposed to just a place what they own and work in?
That's a good loaded question. I think there's a couple of things. One is that the people, you're nothing without your people. So, what I say to people, and even when I started Nexus Digital, it was a partnership model, because we said you don't need to have 100% of $10,000 when you can have 100% of $10 million. It's like, it makes a big difference in your mind, but at the same time, what's the difference if you have 10% of a $10 million company, all right, versus 100% of a $1 million company? And so understanding the valuation, understanding that sharing the wealth and doing good and bringing up that next generation of people, you invest in your employees, invest in your staff, invest in your team. I think those are the things that differentiate successful companies, because if you have, if everybody's an owner, and I don't use that, the 90s and the 2000s kind of spoiled a lot of companies. They used to give stock options, and they still do with some companies. And people got, I remember Microsoft, that it was one of my biggest clients, and it was a billionaire reporting to a billionaire reporting to a billionaire, right? And then they had a whole bunch of multimillionaires that were at the developer level. It was the craziest thing, because the stock split, all that stuff. And that was great for that group. And now the next wave of people that have come in, and they've grown much bigger, obviously, but it becomes more diluted over time, and, they're a big enterprise now. But when you're a small shop or a mid-sized shop, you need to think about it from a slightly different perspective, which is that, you're building an asset. People are part of that asset. You're nothing. I mean, yeah, you might have a storefront, you might have inventory, and you might have products that you like, but at the end of the day, you also have people. And if you don't view that as a consolidated asset, that's where you could fall short. You can't just, make a transaction or a liquidity event. People, every private equity person, any kind of M&A group that I've ever talked to has always been, okay, yeah, we want to look at your P&L. We want to understand your EBITDA, but we also want to meet your people, because it has to continue after you get out of the way, or, or we're going to get rid of all these people, and what are we buying? A book of business? Okay, great. Got it. But you really need to think about it from an asset standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a tremendous piece of advice, Ken, because having sold my company as well, if the companies are completely dependent upon you being at the top, then the valuation drops dramatically.
Exactly.
And as you say, bring the people, they are the foundation. They are effectively the nuts and bolts of your company, so that you can move away from it and see it as an asset as opposed to you at the top. That's a fantastic piece of advice to end on. Thank you very much for that,
thank
Ken.
you.
So, Ken, if people want to get hold of you, what's the best way of getting hold of you?
Email ken@nexusdigitalgroup.net, or they can call my phone or whatever, whatever. But if they go to nexusdigitalgroup.net, remember .net, not .com. I don't know why we couldn't buy that one, but anyway, they can get a hold of me that way.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate your sharing your insights with us today. It's been absolutely fantastic. And ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this particular episode with Ken, then please make sure that you do 4 things. Make sure you like, you comment, you subscribe, and you share so that everybody and more people within the industry can learn from leaders such as Ken. Until the next time, goodbye, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.